In this section, we will discuss the deal that Biden and McCarthy reached to raise the debt ceiling in exchange for spending caps, work requirements, IRS funding cuts, and COVID-19 rescue dollars rescission. The debt ceiling is the legal limit on how much the federal government can borrow to pay its bills. If Congress does not raise or suspend the debt ceiling by a certain date, the government risks defaulting on its obligations, which could have catastrophic consequences for the economy and the global financial system. To avoid this scenario, Biden and McCarthy negotiated a bipartisan agreement that would suspend the debt ceiling until January 2025, allowing the government to continue borrowing and paying its bills without interruption. However, this agreement came with some trade-offs that both sides had to accept. One of the main trade-offs was a cap on discretionary spending, which is the part of the federal budget that Congress decides every year. This includes funding for defense, education, health, science, infrastructure, and other programs. The deal would keep non-defense spending roughly flat in 2024 and increase it by only 1%, and it would also boost defense spending to about $886 billion in 2024, matching Biden's proposed budget. This means that some of Biden's priorities, such as climate change, immigration reform, and social programs, would face tight constraints in the next few years. Another trade-off was a change in the work requirements for some federal programs that provide food and health care assistance to low-income Americans. The deal would impose stricter work requirements on people who receive benefits from the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, also known as food stamps. It would also require states to verify the eligibility and income of people who enroll in Medicaid, the health insurance program for the poor and disabled. These changes are aimed at reducing fraud and saving money, but critics argue that they would make it harder for millions of Americans to access basic needs. A third trade-off was a cut in the funding for the Internal Revenue Service, IRS, the federal agency that collects taxes and enforces tax laws. The deal would rescind $80 billion that was allocated to the IRS last year as part of the Inflation Reduction Act. This money was supposed to help the IRS crack down on tax evasion and close the tax gap, which is the difference between what taxpayers owe and what they actually pay. The deal would also limit the IRS's ability to access information from banks and other financial institutions about taxpayers' accounts. These changes are favored by Republicans who oppose giving more power and resources to the IRS, but opposed by Democrats who want to ensure that wealthy individuals and corporations pay their fair share of taxes. A fourth trade-off was a rescission of some unused COVID-19 relief funds that Congress approved through previous bills. The deal would claw back about $30 billion from various federal programs that were intended to help people and businesses cope with the pandemic. These include programs for rental assistance, small business loans, broadband internet for rural areas, vaccine research and development, disaster relief, and global health. The deal would protect some pandemic funding for veterans' medical care, housing assistance, Indian Health Service, and developing new vaccines and treatments. The rescission is meant to reduce government spending and debt, but some argue that it would undermine the recovery and preparedness efforts. These are some of the main elements of the deal that Biden and McCarthy reached to raise the debt ceiling in exchange for spending caps, work requirements, IRS funding cuts, and COVID-19 rescue dollars rescission. The deal is not perfect for either side, but it is seen as a necessary compromise to avoid a default and avert a crisis.